Hi, I'm Eris, writer for Bad Astra, and this is a drama video. So I've seen some pretty wild misinformation getting spread around on TikTok by a very large creator by the name of Gabbie Hanna. She is a former Viner, a YouTuber, and she had a mental health break on the internet, and she posted several TikToks about it. Here at Bad Astra, we don't condone bullying. We only condone strongly worded messages to anti-science senators that rhyme with Grinsey Lamb.
So why are we bothering reacting to this influencer who most people have never heard of? Well, besides spreading misinformation to her millions of mainly young and impressionable followers, she's bringing up a lot of misconceptions which are common among cis straight white neoliberals, which we should address. Gabbie Hanna just said a lot of quiet parts out loud, and if we condemn her and her statements without addressing why what she said is wrong, others who agree with her won't change their minds. They'll just feel bullied by internet strangers, and that's not a great way to further the conversation.
We're going to be breaking down the science like we do all the time here on Bad Astra. Well, I'll say Astra does it because I'm just a chaos gremlin. The first one that we're gonna talk about is one on environmentalism, and I'm gonna switch over to Astra for this one. I'll be back though with the neuroscience stuff.
Let's do a quick deconstruction of a seemingly environmentalist take. Here's a clip of Gabbie Hanna's explanation that I think needs to be addressed.
And I respect that we don't know everything and we don't understand everything. And frankly, I think that human beings, have devolved. I think that we were meant to be what we used to be. Maybe we were meant to stay fucking apes, because apes are straight up living in nature. They can literally wreck a human being if they want, and they don't, because they're fucking peaceful until you fuck with them. They just hang out and have sex and masturbate and eat and hang with their babies and hang out in the fucking river. Like, apes have it good. We're the monsters, and we're weak as shit. We had to build guns. You know what I mean?
Gabbie. Girl, that's an eco-fascist dog whistle. Naomi Klein, author of several books on ecofascism, describes it as the following. Ecofascism argues that climate change is God's will, that there are too many people anyway, so there's going to be a great purge, and perhaps that's all for the best. It's environmentalism through genocide. This rhetoric, which I first heard as part of the villain monologue in The Matrix.
Human beings are a disease. A cancer of this planet. You are a plague.
Popped up again during the pandemic in the form of humans are the real virus. This not only completely ignores the indigenous populations who protect the ecosystems they live in, and also all the people in third world countries with the lowest carbon footprints that are suffering the consequences of climate change the most, but casually devalues human lives and the technological advances which have improved and extended those lives. So Thanos is the villain, actually. Now, we should acknowledge the tiny nugget of truth buried very deep down in eco-fascist views. Reducing the global population would in turn reduce carbon emissions and reduce climate change. But there are non-murdery ways to do that. A 2017 study showed that voluntarily lowering fertility rates through strategies such as improved healthcare, education, and economic opportunity for women and girls would result in a 35% reduction in emissions by 2100. Project Drawdown notes that improving the health and education of women and girls globally would better equip them for the climate crisis, with the side effect of saving 85 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent due to slowing population growth. Studies show that given options, people will choose to have fewer children. But eco-fascists just see poor, uneducated people having too many children as some kind of choice without any system or context behind it. This, frankly, eugenics perspective is on full display in the movie Idiocracy, which a lot of people have been referencing more and more, despite the fact that that movie did not age well. It says a lot about our society that many of us skip right over empower people with education and family planning healthcare and go straight to humanity is a disease and we shouldn't exist. Do we really think universal education and reproductive healthcare is that unattainable? Please watch the abortion video. Now, is Gabbie Hanna actively calling for a human genocide to save the planet? Of course not. However, framing humanity as the monsters and saying we shouldn't have evolved is rhetoric that has roots in the discriminatory beliefs of ecofascism, racism, classism, ableism, etc., all of which have a lot in common with eugenics arguments. And that ain't it, Chief. Links to all of the sources for everything I just said are down below in the description. So instead of calling humans monsters, it would be better to talk about the benefits of the Green New Deal, the Red New Deal created by indigenous environmental activists, and the importance of pushing for more regulations on corporations, for carbon taxes. And by the way, forget about carbon offsets, because as John Oliver pointed out, those don't actually work. And it's time to stop blaming individuals for our systemic inability to innovate because of the oil and gas industry and the auto industry's chokehold on our leadership.
Thanks, Astra. Okay, so I'm gonna get into one of my favorite scientific disciplines, which is neuroscience. I love connecting mental health and the brain. I find it so interesting. So I've done a lot of research on this topic in particular. And we're first going to start off with a video. There's a larger context that she has before she gets to this piece of misinformation, but it's not relevant to understand what she's saying. So let's roll the clip.
Or accessing the other 90% of the brain that they say that we're not accessing.
Okay, so that's just so false. The myth of you're only using 10% of your brain comes from a quote sometimes attributed to Albert Einstein where it's taken way too literally when he's describing, how he's so big-brained. Such a big brain boy. Or it's also from the American psychologist and author William James, who was alive in the late 1800s. The brain has several different parts and different functions, so let's go over that first. So you have the cerebellum, right, which is a lower part of your brain that's in charge of controlling your muscles and balance. These are very basic, sort of like automatic things that your brain doesn't really have to think too much about to actually function. The brainstem is even more basic in terms of its functioning, and it keeps you alive by doing things like digesting food and managing your heart rate and body temperature and, other fun, not dying tasks. So the brainstem connecting the cerebellum and the cerebrum is really important because the cerebellum has a lot of basic survival things like fight or flight. So once that alarm bell goes off in the amygdala, which is part of the cerebellum, your cerebrum up in your upper brain has to process that information and determine whether or not that's a real threat that you need to worry about. As someone with a panic disorder, mine don't work together. They don't communicate really well. So my brain is like, we're in danger all the time. My cerebrum isn't quick enough to just be like, hey, there's smoke, but there's no fire. That's probably the best way to kind of describe the relationship between those two. Your cerebrum, or your upper brain, handles a lot more of the tasks that give humanity a bit of a difference than the rest of the animal kingdom. So it handles things like impulse control, interpreting sensory information, fine motor skills, and emotions. For my fellow Irish folks, especially those raised Irish Catholic, those are those things that you suppress and push way down until you're at the pub with your friends and you're too many drinks in to stop them from coming out when your friend asks, so how have you been doing really? And then it makes your eyes leak uncontrollably. Apparently that's a normal thing. Just because we don't use our conscious mind, like, as 100% of our brain, doesn't mean that the rest of our brain is just slacking off. It's doing things to keep us alive and functioning. Honestly, you're not even using 100% of your brain at any given time during the day. However, neurologist John Henley states that evidence would show over a day that you do use 100% of your brain, and that a day is a 24-hour cycle. So, no, you're not only using 10% of your brain, you're using 100% over the course of a day. And there's no superpowers to unlock after you find the other 90%. We're going to move on to the next slice of the misinformation pie. This one is about dissociative identity disorder, or DID for short. It's very popular on TikTok. I'm not going to comment further on that. But this is a disorder that is a result of extreme and consistent childhood trauma. Think of the worst thing someone could do to a kid, and that's how you develop DID. Granted, not everyone with the severe, childhood trauma does develop DID because it is a very rare disorder. However, it is a coping mechanism that the brain comes up with.
See, when people say things like invalidate the DID community, I remember saying that I cured DID because I was fucking convinced as fuck that I had DID. I have so many of them on camera where I do the thing, where they say that they're switching personas, right? So I'm like, holy fucking shit, I have DID. I said, I cured DID, ADHD, and OCD. Anyway, the conclusion that I came with my own kind of mental health journey of trying to figure out what the fuck was going on with me was every time I was dissociating, it was my body was kind of just tricking itself into meditation and breath work. It was you're really fucking overwhelmed right now. Slow down and breathe. And then when I would come back, I was somebody new. I was somebody fresher. And then I also realized that these characters that I was creating in my mind were just that. And then as I was connecting with my spirituality more, I was like, oh my God, all of this stuff, these thoughts, these feelings, this is spirit, which is also thought, because our thoughts are not written by us. They're given to us, and then we choose which ones that we want to continue to live with, basically.
I have done a lot of research into a variety of different mental disorders. I watch a lot of DID YouTubers specifically, so I'll make sure to link Multiplicity in Me, who makes fantastic content on it. Granted, Jess has gone through Final Fusion, so congratulations on that. But she's an excellent resource. The past videos that she's made on her experience with DID are really educational and well thought out and researched, so highly recommend that you check her out below. I'm also going to be linking The Body Keeps the Score. So Bessel van der Kolk is a really great doctor who wrote this book about how trauma impacts the brain and how to work through it with different forms of therapy that might work for you. So I love that book so much. So I'll also be sprinkling in references from the book as well. Let's start by addressing what Gabbie said about her dissociation and coming out as a new person. For those of you who don't know, dissociation is a response to trauma. If you got into a car crash, right, and you saw a car crash on the road, your brain might snap you into a state where the upper brain doesn't have a lot of activity going. Dissociation also involves the fragmentation of sensory information, so that's why a lot of people who have gone through severe trauma don't necessarily have a cohesive narrative, because there's no cohesive narrative in their brain from that event. the brain went into protection mode instead. When it comes to forms of dissociation, the one that I know most about and have the most experience with is depersonalization, which is basically like feeling like you've been taken out of your body for a while and you're almost like watching yourself. This is a massive dissociation. This isn't just like you've dissociated. It is much more intense. You know, you go numb, and brain scans have shown that almost every area of the brain has decreased activity. This interferes with thinking, focusing, and orientation as well. Again, it's like an out-of-body experience. With DID, your brain is still functioning. However, it's a little bit different, and the brain structure is different, and you can see that in brain scans. It's an altered state of consciousness, which is why a lot of time systems will abbreviate that to alters, not characters you have control over. So these alters can have various different personalities, different memories, and most importantly, like, they create an amnesia wall when you switch in and out. You can't remember. It's basically like experiencing a blackout, but somebody else was there instead. And this is a result of the brain not being able to fully form a sense of self as a child. So when you're a kid growing up in a non-traumatic situation, there is a stage of development where all of the sort of like fragments of your personality become one, and that becomes you. However, because DID involves severe childhood trauma that impacts them at that young age, they can't form a cohesive personality as a result. They're remaining fractured. DID is designed to protect your brain and hide in plain sight, which is why so many times alters that are out have little to no idea that the others actually exist. And this is also why it is typically diagnosed in adults, because it isn't really until then that you start sensing that something is off and something is wrong. So internal family system therapy developer Dr. Richard Schwartz identified the continuum of the dissociation where fractals of the self, the alters, are polarized parts of the self that are in constant battle, which is why many systems have very much overlapping alter roles. Like, there is a frequency of persecutors that will like tell you all the horrible things about yourself and try to hurt yourself. There are the protectors that come out when you're feeling distressed and they need to take care of the situation. There are caretakers. There are oftentimes littles or, you know, child alters as well. So sure, Gabbie, if that idea gives you comfort that these are characters and you have full control of your story, then by all means, go ahead. Like, I'm not going to stop you from coping the way that you need to cope. However, saying that to your audience is a little dangerous because it encourages mentally ill people to suppress it, to say they have full control over it, where that's not going to be healthy. Okay? If you continue to suppress your symptoms of any sort of health condition, it can lead to serious consequences, and it could lead to things getting much, much worse. So sometimes you just need to let your body and your brain do its thing and process the way it needs to. Because if you don't make time for your health, your brain and your body will make you take that time. Woo! Self-care! More on the rhetoric side of this, I kind of think I understand what Gabbie was trying to say in this respect. So the quote that she got in trouble for saying, as you kind of heard in her explanation, was that she cured DID, ADHD, and OCD. So what I think is that she missed the my in that sentence, which is funny because it's like a 2-letter little possessive pronoun that got her into a lot of trouble with other people online. It's almost like pronouns are important or something. So do I believe that Gabbie Hanna genuinely thinks that she's cured everyone's DID, ADHD, and OCD? Absolutely not. I don't think that she thinks that at all. Do I think that she might have cured her DID, ADHD, and OCD? Maybe. She might very well believe that she has cured it in herself, and that's great. Like, that's so shady. But like, yeah, if she wants to believe that, by all means. Saying I'm sorry is not a big deal. It's very easy to say, hi, yeah, I'm sorry, I meant to say my OCD, ADHD, and DID. I didn't mean everybody else's, so I'm so sorry if that came off the wrong way. Apologies are a great way to heal the hurt that you caused and also learn something really important in the process. Let's talk about mania, because Gabbie had her own experience, and I will never take that away from her. There was just a little bit of misinformation in there that I think is important to address. So she was correct when it comes to the typical time spans of a manic episode and hypomanic episode, but it's still considered dangerous to herself and those around her. So I'm going to quote a few studies, and I'm going to be directly reading from them as well. Again, sources cited down below. In the case that the disorder becomes uncontrollable during an episode of mania, it may lead to situations that pose danger to the patient or the public. Cases have the potential to engender serious situations, in particular, such as self-harming behavior, sexual behavior that is outside the person's usual life experience, random and unnecessary spending of money, overactivity, and risky behavior that tend to worry people in the patient's life and clinicians. There's some serious danger that she just dismisses. And if it's left untreated, it can actually get a lot worse. Another study. During manic episodes, patients exhibit elevated or irritable mood, hyperactivity, increased speed of speech or need to talk, flight of ideas, inflated self-esteem, decreased need for sleep, distractibility, and interest in risky activities. Unless treated, a manic episode can last around 4 to 13 months. And that's not it. There are studies regarding brain scans of people during mania. Functional imaging studies that scanned manic patients at rest have indicated changes in blood flow and metabolism, particularly in the orbitofrontal cortex. Compared with demographically matched healthy controls, the manic cases showed a dysregulation of medial and ventral prefrontal circuitry during risky decision-making. TLDR, mania is still dangerous, and it needs to be treated like it is a serious mental health episode, because it is. Like, just because you didn't hurt yourself or others in this one scenario doesn't mean that it's gonna be safe every single time from now on. Okay, I should also make a very strongly worded note here. Do not call the cops on someone who is having a mental health crisis. I know you mean well, but it is oftentimes more dangerous for the person because police officers rarely, if ever, get trained on how to deal with people with mental health illnesses and conditions. That was a lot of heavy stuff. So why don't I pitch it over to Astra again? This is kind of funny, so like, have fun with the light stuff.
Oh, there's nothing I want to explain more than that video with that hose, because I couldn't believe that people were not seeing what was happening. I want to preface this by saying that I have used many a hose, and I have used that hose many times. I know how hoses work, I know how gravity works, I know how water pressure works. I don't know much about physics, but I know enough. I was washing my car and my trash cans because they stink, whatever, and then it turned into this acute angle, full water pressure, look at my hand, I'm not doing anything, rises up, and it's holding itself in a right angle. Have you ever seen anything like this? Look, my hand is still not moving, I'm just allowing this to do whatever it wants to do. And what happens here is along this row, I have plants that are super dry and dying in the California heat. And it literally watered my plants all the way down. It does a full fucking circle, maintaining a right angle. In what world would a rubber hose hold this type of water pressure and still maintain a right angle and then spin in a perfect fucking circle? Notice I'm still not moving. It's still holding itself in this bizarre fucking angle.
If you have a kink in a water hose, it forces the rushing water to change direction, and the water will push back against the hose, because for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. This reaction, or pressure, will cause the hose to whip back straight, but because there's so much pressure built up, the hose will overshoot and re-kink in the other direction. Rinse, repeat, literally, pushing the kink back and forth along the hose. It's the same principle as the used car inflatable men, and why thin, elongated galaxies tend to buckle. Downstream, for kinks approaching the end of a hose, there's less inertia to prevent the hose from violently flailing or whipping around. Same force on a lighter object results in more acceleration.
And I have all of this information downloading into my brain as this is happening, because in California, people will shame the fuck out of you for watering your plants because of the drought, right? So then all of this information is being downloaded into my head about, yes, water your plants, water your grass, these beautiful living pieces of earth, because the water cycle, Mother Nature, will take care of it. The water cycle is water into the earth, heat causes condensation and evaporation, which goes up to the clouds and then causes precipitation, which is the rain. It's back in the earth, it goes back up. Did you know, and we learned this in 4th grade, not a single drop of water on the entire earth has ever left the earth's atmosphere. The reason we're in drought is because we're hoarding the water in the droughts. We're making the drought worse by not putting our water back into the earth so it can condensate, precipitate, evaporate. The water cycle.
Oh boy, howdy, I'm back with more environmental stuff. I'm scared of doing a climate change video. Don't at me. It's in the works and it will be in the works for a very long time. So, second point, Gabbie's misunderstanding of the water cycle. So, Southern California is experiencing a drought, so local leaders are encouraging residents to limit water use because fresh water is scarce. And by encouraging, I mean an official water restriction. The Metropolitan Water District of Southern California has ordered unprecedented outdoor water restrictions for Southern California amid a water shortage emergency. The declaration, which begins June 1st, restricts outdoor water usage to just 1 day a week, a move that will affect about 6 million people in parts of LA, Ventura, and San Bernardino counties. Okay, so hoarding water, as Gabbie Hanna asserts, is not why the drought is happening. John Oliver did a whole segment on the misuse of river water and climate change that we'll link down below. But TLDR, water in this region has to be brought in via rivers and watersheds from snowmelt. And by the way, no, it doesn't snow in downtown LA. The water on the mountains, the Sierra Nevadas mainly, accumulates in the form of snow. If Southern California was a closed ecosystem and Gabbie Hanna was watering native plants with recycled water, then sure, some of her video would be less ridiculous. But California is not a closed ecosystem. Ecosystems don't stop at state borders. As she points out, the entire Earth is a closed ecosystem that water has never left. Except the times water got brought up to space with the astronauts on the ISS, or when the astronauts went to the moon, or just astronauts themselves because humans are mostly water. But I'm being a little sassy. Unless humans intervene, and for the most part, water stays on Earth. But Southern California is not the entire Earth and is not a closed ecosystem by itself. So the water that evaporates there can move to other parts of the world because clouds can in fact move. Wind is a thing. If Gabbie Hanna is watering her plants in California, it's possible that once the water evaporates, it will move to another part of the globe as a cloud. But I'm also going to use this as an excuse to discuss water retention and soil health. So despite the simplified water cycle we learn in elementary school, water doesn't actually evaporate immediately upon precipitating. Although in LA it sometimes does a little too quickly, but we'll get into that. Water after precipitating gets absorbed by soil and plants. I'm going to keep this just slightly less simplified than the elementary water cycle, just to keep this video short because this is a tangent. Soil with more carbon can store more water. That's a dramatic oversimplification, but that's what you need to know right now. Due to historic agricultural practices, however, the topsoil in California has a depleted carbon content and can't store as much water as it used to. Due to a long history of agriculture in the region and harmful practices, the topsoil in California has a depleted carbon content and can't store as much water, which contributes further to the drought. So the water that Gabbie Hanna talks about as raining down or precipitating is what we can think of as stormwater. And a lot of that does get collected, but the vast majority of water used in Southern California is groundwater. So that's water that's been absorbed by the soil and plants, and snowmelt that is from the region. It's from the Sierra Nevadas, but it's not actually from downtown LA or really where most people live in SoCal. It's snowmelt from up in the mountains, where it snows. So it is local water, but for the context of this video, it is imported water because the water that Gabbie Hanna is using to water her plants is not gonna rain right back down on Gabbie's house. That's not how ecosystems work. That's not how wind works. So we're gonna talk about groundwater. Storing water is good for plants, especially in California where agriculture is very important. But due to the long history of agricultural practices, the topsoil in California has a depleted carbon content and can't store as much water, which further contributes to the drought because less groundwater means more dependent on other sources, often overdependence on those other sources, which dry up. It's a vicious cycle. Soils with lower carbon content require more fertilizer, more pesticides, are less reliable year to year, and require a lot more watering. In one experiment, covering the soil surface with a mulch of crop residue, a regenerative practice that protects soil and reduces evaporation, resulted in a 29% reduction in crop irrigation needs compared to uncovered soil. Another study found that covering soil increased its water retention by 74%. So I want to clarify that agriculture itself is not the problem. It's specifically the methods of agriculture that were used, and changing those methods, often by a simple step like putting mulch down or changing your types of fertilizer, can really, really help. Things like crop rotation. It's not humanity that's the problem, it's our lack of innovation, all of which can be fixed. Sorry, back off my anti-eco-fascist soapbox. Putting carbon back into the soil has the added benefit of taking it out of the air. Worldwide, soil carbon sequestration could remove 110 parts per million of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere over 50 years. So that's kind of double dipping in a climate change combating way, because not only are you combating droughts by increasing soil carbon content, you are taking that carbon out of the air, also reducing CO2 and climate change. Love two birds with one stone. Now, I could spend a whole video talking about the more complicated water cycle than the one we learn in elementary school, and why SoCal doesn't get enough rain to support its population, but that's not really here. I will have to throw this next part about Mother Earth to Eris to address the nature and spiritual side, since I'm not religious and she's a witch who talks to plants in the mountains and all that.
Yeah, fuck all of this. The hose is not Mother Nature talking to you. It is a piece of rubber with water running through it. If you continue to do what you want and justify it as Mother Nature is telling me it's fine, even though it's actually hurting the planet, then you're not talking to Mother Nature. You're not listening to Mother Nature. That's your ego talking. At the end of the day, Gabbie Hanna is still a human being. She's still fallible, and that's okay. You don't have to be an expert on everything in order to have a platform. Her TikToks concerned a lot of people, but that doesn't exempt her from taking responsibility for the harm that she caused during that manic episode. Your mental health is never an excuse, but it can serve as an explanation for your actions. Yeah, that was so much more serious than I really wanted it to be. Yeah, I'll be out with more bimbo calculus content soon. Until then, stay hydrated, don't be a jerk, And when someone's spreading misinformation, do your best to be kind. Happy spooky season. Thank you so much for watching our video here at Bad Astra. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, please, and watch our videos all the way through the end because I have shingles and we need to get monetized, please. I'm not feeling well. Make me feel better by watching our videos.
Ad Astra, to the stars, to the stars.